Sarah Knows Support Workers. Today I've got Luke. Welcome to the podcast, Luke.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
You were such a hard man to pin down to get to this podcast. So prior to this, you were in Mexico.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So actually, when we first spoke, I was in Cambodia, and then I did a surprise trip to Mexico. It was like a last minute thing. So essentially, I was born there, and Mexico is one of the host nations for the World Cup. And so it was just a conversation with my brother around, hey, we're never going to host it again in our lifetime. This is a once lifetime opportunity. So it was like a last minute, stuff, let's just do it. So we flew to Mexico to see the World Cup, to kind of tick that off the bucket list and see our team play in our home stadium, which is remarkable. Yeah. So that's the little adventure that we've been on. Yeah.
It's not your first time you've been to Cambodia. Is that right?
Yeah, so I've actually done like community development stuff there. And so I actually lived there. So I've been there maybe 6 or 7 times or something like that. But my longest stint was I lived there for 6 months to do some community development stuff. And I will then go back and kind of connect with the team there. I'm sure we'll get into it later in the podcast, but essentially some of the stuff that we've done over in Paylos, where we're seeing about where are some of the parallels and some stuff that we can do over there and stuff like that. So that's something that's kind of in the works and exciting, but I'm sure we'll get to it eventually as we go down the rabbit hole.
Well, if we're diving headfirst into the rabbit hole, I'm nosy and I've got to ask a question. When I went back to your LinkedIn, you've done a lot of case management prior to owning a business. Can you explain to why case management? Because it's not really appealing to a lot of people when they see case management. It's at times can be a job role that people don't want to do because there's a lot to it.
Yeah. So the shortest version of the story would be that I was an at-risk youth myself, and I guess, was struggling with a lot of the things that a lot of the people we support at Paylos struggle with. So like, I guess the drugs and the abuse and family violence and that kind of stuff. And from a very kind of early on, so I guess when I was entering the workforce and thinking about kind of studying, I was very much drawn towards something to do with social work and community services and that kind of stuff. And so I ended up getting a job working in residential care. And so I worked with young people who were on statutory orders or on family reunification orders. And there was a lot of hands-on work. So it was like, a lot of, I would say it was like, 95% face-to-face time. And there was like some paperwork you do some case notes, NDIS shit. But it was a lot of like direct work. And I'd have a lot of conversation with the young people, and we would kind of talk about and reflect on what was going on in their life and stuff like that. And I felt in my role, there was a bit of a disconnect between the conversations that I was having with them and I guess what was happening in their world and in their care team and that kind of stuff. And so I guess a little bit of curiosity and a little bit of frustration. I was really interested in entering a case management role purely because I wanted to see if we could maybe move the needle a bit. And so my theory was if I get involved in case management, if that would give me, I guess, a little bit more of a platform to advocate for our young people that I was working with. But what I was worried about was my experience was, and it was definitely one-sided, was that like I was doing all the groundwork and the case managers, they barely knew our kids and what do they know, and they hardly see them once a fortnight or whatever it is. And that kind of stuff. So I felt like this case manager was like disconnected from young people. And so I was worried about entering into that space and then I guess losing that connection. And not having heaps of, I guess, contact time with the young people I was supporting. But I actually found out I enjoyed it a lot more. So I thought I would do it for the educational purpose and the experience purpose, but not really enjoy the role. I actually found I was a lot more in tune and a lot more, well, I guess I had a lot more influence and a lot more of a position to be able to advocate for them. So yeah, the face-to-face time with my young people definitely decreased, but being able to, I guess, bring their voice forefront definitely increased. And so that was a little bit about my journey, right? So essentially lived experience, seeing firsthand some of the barriers that the young people face, wanting to be, I guess, involved in that sector in some capacity. And then after spending maybe 5 years or whatever it was in that capacity, seeing opportunities. And then so went into case management. I did case management with Salvation Army, Anglicare and Very So I worked across 3 different organizations in different programs, but I guess a really good experience in working case management, but essentially found that the role of advocacy was something that I really enjoyed when working with my young people. Yeah.
I'm curious. All right. You've have lived experience, then you go into case management Then you go into your business. How do you keep afloat? Because some of the stories that our young people tell us are quite overwhelming and they're really quite sad and some of them are really quite tragic. How do you keep afloat for your own well-being because you're really in the thick of it?
Yeah. So I think if I take you back to my lived experience, there's this Christian organization called Tem Care, and they donated money to my mum. So my mum's a single mum on the disability pension. Yes, yeah, struggling with family violence, that kind of stuff, right? She had two hyperactive young boys on the streets of Dandenong, so it was just quite chaotic. And this organization donated some money to send me and my younger brother on a camp called CYC. So my mum got respite. We weren't a religious family, whatever, but I think my mum was really desperate for respite, right? And so we got sent on these camps, and this really changed my world. Right? I got access to positive role models. I got access to community, connect with positive communities, pro-social activities, all that kind of stuff. This is all great while my mom was getting respite. So essentially, the context of that was the friends that I grew up with didn't have great stories. You know, the sad part of my story is that two of my friends died because of heroin overdose. Five of my friends were in prison, in different prisons throughout Victoria, and a few of them are homeless. And so not one of my friends from the circle that I grew up with, I guess, made it out. And there was quite a sobering reality for me of just how significant my, I guess, life journey was. And I was really trying to reconcile and understand what was different for me. Right. When I thought about the friends that I grew up with, the friends that I rode bikes with and all that kind of stuff. Right. And I saw there was so much power in what happened at CYC. There was power in sitting around a campfire, the silly songs that they did, the rock climbing, the silly games, the messy games they played and stuff like that. And so then when I was working in the residential care space, what would take me maybe 2 days at CYC. So if I was a cabin leader on one of these camps, you know, by 1 or 2 days, the young person just thinks you're the coolest thing ever. Right. It would sometimes take me up to 2 years to get a young person out of home care to, I guess, trust me or have a reflective conversation with me. And so there was a significant difference in my role as a residential care worker and then my role as a cabin leader. Now, I'm also recognizing there'll be different levels of trauma and there'll be different people who are on different journeys and that kind of stuff. So I can't directly compare each young person, but there was enough of a difference to say, I think we're missing something here, right? And so in my career, I would go back and volunteer in these camps because they meant so much to me for what they did for me while I was still working as a residential care worker or working as a case manager. And one of the reflections that I had was I would look at some of my young people in out-of-home care and I'm like, dude, I would love it if you could come to Forest Edge. I would love it if you could come to Phillip Island. And I was like, man, but I knew that the service model that CYC had wasn't appropriate for my young people, right? Because they've got one volunteer that's, you know, really passionate, but not qualified to like 4 or 5 young people in the cabin. And the young people that I would support would need like one-to-one care, right? And had quite complex behaviors and stuff like that. So I knew that the service model wasn't there for them. But that was okay because CYC was doing an amazing job for their cohort. But I recognized there was a gap. And so I guess to understand the journey was that I experienced greatly from CYC. I then went back to volunteer with CYC. Then when I got a job in paid work, doing youth work and stuff like that, and I did some of the study around trauma and stuff like that, the result of those two worlds, I guess, results in Paylos, right? Because it was drawing upon the clinical frameworks that I was working with, right? And so these underpin the work that I did, and these are all evidence based and so I was fully aware of, you know, being trauma informed and strength based practices and all that kind of stuff. So I had, I guess, these clinical frameworks, but then I also had experience with quite fun, silly, playful outdoor adventure stuff. And I really wanted to see how I could bring the magic from the silly, playful,
Yeah.
fun camps that I was on and draw for some of those strengths, recognizing the limitations in that service model, right? And then go, all right, cool. But then also in the clinical space or in the official space in residential care, it was kind of like, all right, so there are some frameworks and some safeguards that are super important. But there's also a lot of labels and jargon that's not helpful, right? There's a lot of like the environment they're in, all that kind of stuff. That's not going to be helpful. So I was like, cool. So how do I guess, pick apart the best? So it's like, how do I pick the best from the fun stuff? And how do I draw from the experience and the clinical frameworks from that stuff? And I guess those two things form together to make Paylos. So the natural progression was I saw the magic, did some more study, and then reflected and was like, there's this hybrid model of withdrawing from the fun and the silly stuff while also bringing the trauma-informed frameworks. And that's how we kind of got to Paylos, is the shortest way that I can sum up.
So were you just like one day, you know what, I can do this better? Like, why
No,
not?
no, no, no.
Jump.
So no, no. So essentially, actually, I'm not sure if I've told anyone this story before,
There's a
but
first.
essentially, yeah, yeah. So essentially, I think I was having a chat with somebody, and we were talking. We do that fun game of like, if you won the lottery, what would your like life look like, kind of thing, right? Now, keep in mind, at this point, I'd already been reflecting deeply on how do I draw from the stuff at Seaway, and how do I make that accessible to young people in out of home care? Because essentially, I felt really strongly about the young people in out of home care having access to the stuff that I was seeing at COC. I was like, man, these kids really need to go full driving, camping, roasting marshmallows, catching their first fish, like all these amazing things. And so I didn't have that growing up, right? So it's kind of like I knew the feeling of growing up without a dad, being a low, being in housing commission and going to, and just kind of like hearing about other rich kids going to like Gold Coast and doing all these cool family vacation and not having access to that. And I guess what that did to my internal working model. So some of that lived experience kind of informed when I looked at the young people I was working with out of home care, being like, man, these kids really deserve like a fishing trip. They deserve like a campsite they can say is theirs. And some of the stuff that other families get to say, like, my dad always takes us to Lakes Entrance every Easter or something, like, right? Like our kids in out of home care, they don't get to say those sentences. And it represents something much deeper. It represents like, well, I'm worth somebody's time to take me camping. I'm worth somebody's time to have these experiences. Somebody wants to make these memories with me, right? So you understand, I was like reflecting on these concepts quite deeply. It was kind of quite heavy on my heart, right? Anyway, the leap of faith that you're referring to came from a conversation I was having with a friend when we talked about. Awesome. All right. So essentially, what happened was, so I had all of this on my mind, right? So I was kind of reflecting on these young people, and they deserve this, and they deserve someone to take them fishing. They deserve to have these memories. They deserve to be 30 years old one day and remember when they caught their first fish, like a cool uncle and auntie, and they're not going to get that. And how sad is that their childhood is not going to be filled with these memories, right? So I'm really kind of sitting on this space, and I'm really kind of wrestling and reconciling. Anyway, so I'm having a fun conversation with my friend about winning the lottery, right? It's like, dude, what would you do if you won $1 million? What would you do if you had Elon Musk money, right? Like, what would your life look like? And look, the reality is there's only so long that you can sit on a beach sipping cocktails. There's only like, you can buy some super cars and then they'll get boring. You can visit a few hotels and private jet and that kind of stuff. But eventually they get boring. So the reality is, I mean, I think Dana White said it when like people asked him when he's got enough money to retire. He's like, dude, I don't want to sit on a beach all day. Like I want to keep doing things. And so the conversation then flowed into, well, what gets you up in the morning? Like what would get your heart racing? If you had all the money in the world and money wasn't an issue, what's the thing that you would do to get your heart racing, to get you up in the morning that would give you purpose? And I was like, dude, my dream would be like, I would have 4 Land Cruisers and I would have guys either from like my church or something that I knew, who I knew like really loved kids and like really was passionate about youth, right? And I would be like, and I would tell them, dude, you can quit your job full time, us 4. We're going to jump in these 4 Land Cruisers and we're just going to take kids like, resi or kids that are in school that are like struggling, maybe in the wellbeing office a few times a week and that stuff. We're going to find those kids and we're just going to do back-to-back camping trips. And each week we're going to take them out, sit by a fire, have a chat, have a laugh, kick a footy. And we're just going to do this each single week, right? And I was like, dude, that would be my dream. If I had Elon Musk money, that's what I would do. I would hire 4 of my best friends, like not necessarily my best friends, but I would hire 4 of the best people I knew that like really loved youth work. I'd get 4 Land Cruisers and just week after week, we would just take kids away on camping trips and create memories. And we would just make sure that every kid had the opportunity to say, yeah, I went fishing. Yeah, I roasted a marshmallow. Yeah, I got stuck. And I'll just do that for the rest of my life, right? And that was cool. And then I just got hit with this conviction of like, the only thing that's really stopping me from my lottery lifestyle is a little bit of hard work. Because if I wrote some like policies and procedures and I took this to like government or child protection, they might fund this. And so when I realized that between me and what would be just the best thing ever was a little bit of hard work and paperwork. I looked with somebody with ADHD, that was a very big mountain to climb, but it was a huge pill to swallow. Yeah, right. I was
I
like, oh,
didn't pick it.
I do. But I was like, dude, I can't sleep at night knowing that I could probably be doing that. And the only thing that was stopping me was a little bit of hard work and paperwork. So I spent the next 2 years with one of my best friends. She was my manager at Anglicare. And I was like, hey, dude, could you help me? And I would go over to her house, I'd order Uber Eats, and we would just kind of like write policies. And we end up writing like something like 250 policies and procedures and different documents and proposals. And we kind of explain like our frameworks and our funding, that kind of stuff to to take a child protection. So after like 3 years of, like, I guess, writing policies and writing proposals and I guess working out frameworks and service delivery. And then I had to think, and I had to like start learning about business. So I was like, I need a name, I need a logo, I need this, so I'm listening to audiobooks. And the cool thing is my ADHD really did me a favor in there. Like I just kind of kicked into gear. I was like, oh, I need to, and so I'm like coming up with logos and kind of thing. And I was really comfortable with failing, right? But I was
We're
really
used to it.
uncomfortable with the
Yeah.
idea of like,
Mm.
now that I know, like now that I've said this out loud, it had to become a thing. And so I was really determined to be like, yeah, cool. I gave 3 years of my life trying to make this dream come true of taking kids away camping and that kind of stuff. And I just got to give it our best shot. And here we are. Yeah, that's the journey into how we kind of took that leap of faith. Yeah.
Yep. How did you come up with the name?
Okay, cool. So this is a little bit of a not a secret, but it's a little bit of an Easter egg.
Ooh. Oh, you're not going to give me the
So
whole thing?
yeah, no, but it's just kind of like we don't tell people unless they ask. So it's a cool
Okay. Well,
conversation.
I'm
Yeah,
asking.
yeah. Yeah. So there's a story in the Bible where Jesus heals a blind man and in this story, his followers are looking to blame people. They're like, "Oh, whose fault is it that he's blind? Is it his fault? Is his parents' fault?" Like, and Jesus uses mud and puts it on this guy's eyes, and then when he washes it off, he can see. And I really, really like this story because I think for me, my experience when I worked in disability and my experience when I worked in the child protection space, a lot of like a lot of parents or people just not knowing the sector asking me like, so whose fault is it? Who did this, right? Who do we blame, kind of thing. And I think for me, like I think that was an element of our world and our sector, right? I think the other thing for me was like, I definitely think there's a space for clinical frameworks. I think there's a space for clinical spaces and that kind of stuff. But I also think there's a space for alternative spaces. And so I do think there's something powerful about attending a psychologist's office and having a clinical setting and having a formal kind of thing. But I also think there's something powerful in a bushwalk. I do think there's something powerful in sitting around a campfire and skipping rocks. And so, you know, in the stories in the Bible, there are instances where Jesus just heals somebody just by talking. But this is a cool story where he used mud and he used nature. And I just felt like that really reflected what Paylos was about. That like, yeah, there are, I guess, traditional methods to therapeutic approaches, but there is also a space for being out in nature. So the original word for mud in the Bible, the original word for mud is Paylos. And so it's meant to mean that we want to bring healing to people who've experienced trauma by using nature. So by sitting around a campfire with safe adults, by being out in nature, it's not saying that this is the only way. It's saying that like, yeah, there are definitely clinical standard ways to do it, but there's also a space to get out in nature, to sit around a campfire and to have some of those safe conversations that lead to healing. So that's where we got the name from.
That's a lot more deeper than I thought. I thought maybe it was someone you knew, maybe it was a mentor.
Yeah. So then we make jokes about like when the cars are muddy, we're like, that's what we're about, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
So it means mud. It means mud, but so much more than just mud.
well,
Yeah.
you do have the Land Cruisers, and I know I joked in the past that maybe my good old LDV might take it and actually use it as a 4-wheel drive. But to get to these points here, you need people to drive the cars to go bush, right? How do you select your staff to do it? Because like, do you take them on a wilderness camp yourself to ensure that the people that they're supporting will be safe with them? Like, how do you find these people? Because the skill sets to take people on such camps trips, they're not as norm because not everyone knows how to camp or
For sure.
make
For
a
sure.
fire or, put a tent
Yeah.
together.
So I'm gonna unfortunately pop your bubble a little bit. We do heaps of forward driving. Don't get me wrong, but if I was honest with you, it probably only makes up maybe 20% of what we do.
Yeah.
So we've got like a 75-year-old lady that will come and do knitting with us, right? We have like Dungeons and Dragons nights. We have like, so yeah, just to kind of paint the picture, like there are so many, there's so many aspects to Paylos. We have like cooking nights. We have all this kind of stuff. So definitely forward driving is a massive thing of what we do, but really what it's meant to represent is fun looks different for everyone. Connection looks different for everyone. Achievement looks different for everyone. And so it's kind of like for some people, it's forward driving. For some people, it's again, Scrabble indoors. Connection looks different for some people, it's sitting around a campfire. For some people, it's a cup of tea. And so achievement looks different for everyone. For some people, it's finding a friend. For some person, it's finding a job, kind of thing. And so we do have a lot of staff members who have like, I guess, never been in a forward drive, if I'm being honest with you. And I think that's a little bit made me a little bit sad to kind of find out Santa's not real kind of thing. But I think what it more kind of speaks to is the idea of that support, services don't have to have, I guess, the label or the hats of something that's official, but it can look kind of quirky and different. And so a full driving club is one variation of that, but a board game night and a Dungeons and Dragons club is another variation of that. So that's the first point. The second point, especially when it comes to forward driving stuff, even from the get go, like even at the beginning when I thought it was going to be only forward driving. So this is the thing. I thought it was going to be only forward driving. I thought it was going to be youth work and a forward drive. It just kind of evolved into a lot more. But even back then, I never hired anyone based on their forward driving abilities or outdoor abilities. I wasn't hiring like tour guides and adventure tour guides, whatever. I was actually hiring. So I essentially just said, hey, you don't have to be a full driver. You don't have to, I just need you to be a really good role model, a really good problem solver, a really good youth worker, that kind of stuff. So we hired people based on their character. And then we were like, cool, now I need you to learn tennis because there's a kid that's really into tennis. Or, hey, now I need you to learn this, whatever. So we essentially hired for youth workers, and we had a lot of people who've never done any camping and never any forward driving get a job with us, watch our YouTube channel and be like, oh, can I do that? Like, yeah, cool. But we also we work closely with Forward Drive Victoria, and they run what's it called? Accredited. They run accredited training for forward driving. So any of our staff members that do jump into forward drive and run our camps have to go through an accredited training to do that. So essentially we hire you based on being a youth worker, based on your character. But then afterwards, if the forward driving is something that you're interested in, then if the forward driving arm is something you're interested in, then we've got some training things for that. Yeah.
So how long have you guys been open for?
Yeah, 5 years. Our ABN has been active for 5 years. Yeah. So I think it was 3 years before that of just kind of preparing stuff. But in terms of the actual ABN, yeah 5 years. Yeah.
Because you've had kids that you've supported from kids now into adulthood, and their support
Yeah.
very different because if you're talking about that youth work part, they get to an age where they do need to move out of care.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we've got some young people that we'll support who, like when we first had them, we're doing like 5 or 6 days a week in supports. And now we just see them on open days, right? So it started off as like 5 days a week, then it dropped down to like 2 days a week, then it's 1 day a week, or it was like 2 days a week, but at like 1 to 3 ratios and that kind of stuff. And then we saw them like once a month, and we certainly saw them on weekends. But, they've moved out, they live independently, they've got jobs, they're like panel beaters and carpenters, electricians, and they'll come to open days and see us, but they don't need us anymore, which is, obviously the goal, right? The ultimate goal is to put yourself out of a job because, they're standing on their own 2 feet and they're doing well. And so we've got a few participants who've, kind of come through that life cycle where we just see them at open days, which is the best result you can ever have, right?
Who gets the better feeling, like the fuzzy wuzzies? Is it the people that you serve, or is it your staff that get to see the end result of somebody winning? Sorry, that's a really deep question.
Yeah, so I'll actually tell you something that this is probably like a little secret that I've never told anyone. I've told like 1 or 2 people, right? But I've never said this publicly. So I think it was about maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I was defeated, right? I was just so defeated with everything, and I actually just made the decision to quit. I was like, oh, I think I'm done. So, and like, there's another podcast I did where I kind of explained all the barriers that we faced when we were trying to get Paylos off the ground. It was just, it's its own episode in itself, right? But like, we just had like barrier after barrier after barrier. And then we just had people like not honoring invoices. And then we just had like closed door after closed door after closed door. And I was like, man, I'm exhausted. I'm working like 7 days a week. I'm doing like 16, 20-hour days. And I was like, I'm not spending time at home. I'm not being there with my kids and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, it's really taking a toll. And I was like, man, back when I was at case management, I was like, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And I had a regular exercise routine and whatever, So I was just really, really defeated, just getting closed door after closed door after closed door. A few kind of, I guess, like invoices were rejected, and plan managers kind of putting their hand in like, has nothing to do with us, take it to, right. So there's a few of that kind of stuff. And it was like, and I didn't know the NDIS at the time. Like I knew child protection really well, and I was kind of learning NDIS. I was like, what? That's great. Like, so just a few of those things back to back. And I think I just decided, I'm like, dude, the time away from home, it just wasn't worth it. Like I worked out that I would have got paid twice as much if I was working at McDonald's kind of thing or whatever, like I was just like, it was just so disheartening. And we just had to think, right. So I just kind of like made a decision. I think I'm going to close up shop, and I'll slowly start to wind down over the next financial year, and next June 30 would be the end kind of thing. And I'll find people good homes, and in terms of like I'll find staff members other places to work, and so I didn't say this out loud. It was just kind of like a little decision I made in my head, and then the media guy at the time just came to popped by. He's like, "Hey, dude, I just finished this video. We did like a year in review kind of thing. I just wanted to get your okay on the video." I was like, "Oh yeah, sweet, dude. Like, chuck it on." And he chucked on the video, and then I was just like, it went for like 90 seconds. It was like just cuts of different kids having fun. And I was like, oh, that kid's got a job now. That kid's no longer on drugs. The kid's found friends. That kid's gone home to live with mum again. Like, and I just started bawling my eyes out. I was just an absolute mess. And I was like, dude, who do I think I am that I can like turn this off? Like as if I've got a say in how like in this happening. And so I just had this sobering reality of like, and look, it came from my own kind of faith journey of just kind of like, I didn't speak this into existence. Like, like I didn't give it life, so I can't take its life. I was like how arrogant of me to think that this was my doing and I had the control to kind of like, how arrogant for me to think like I was important enough to be able to turn this off. And because it was like, at that point, there was like 200 kids that had come through Paylos at that point. And it was like, there was 200 stories of kids that came on camp, made memories, roasted marshmallows, caught in the rain, got stuck, fell in mud, made friends. Yeah, it was just crazy. So I think the beautiful part about our media is for the people that were there can really identify the progress stories of this, like, this kid, he was too shy to talk to us, had to talk to us through his mum, never left the home. He's now like reading a book and climbing trees and making friends, and we're playing like, ooh, my camera just went off. Sorry. Yeah, making friends and playing hide and seek and kicking footies and having pizza challenges. And so, yeah, there was moments like that where you kind of learn it's much bigger. It's much bigger than ourselves. And obviously I'm here speaking, and it can very easily look like the Luke show, but it's not the Luke show. We've had something like 75, 80, I don't know, 65, 70 staff members with us or something like that. Yeah.
Now that you're a dad, and then that period
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
time, if you have to go back a support worker you were before being a dad to after a dad now, is it different the way that you work with people and support people, especially as a business owner as well? Is it a little bit different now? Because I feel like your kids are young like mine.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got one that's just about to turn 3, and I've got one that's about to turn 1. Right.
It gets worse.
So it's interesting. It's done 2 things for me. In my own personal journey, me and my wife were talking about this. I used to be, I still am, right? But I used to be I used to find it very easy to find compassion for the families that I would work with. So the families of the young people that I would work with in child protection, because I used to always have this idea of like, I don't know their story. I could never judge. And I was a really good advocate to kind of like, when anyone kind of point fingers at people, I'm like, dude, you don't know like the cycle of abuse, generational trauma. You can't even begin to think. Now, I haven't changed that view, right? But at the same time, when you become a parent, there's this overwhelming like sensation to kind of like protect and cuddle. And that was my thing. And so I have found it harder I wouldn't say I've found it harder, but it was kind of like, it's been an interesting kind of reflection when I look at how I just like adore my children. I'm so obsessed with them and kind of thing. And so I guess I'm on a new journey of kind of seeing what that kind of looks like, right? So I guess for the personal perspective, just as I guess like a youth worker, when I think about things like family violence and stuff like that, I found that even harder to kind of like sit with and reflect on kind of thing when I just think about how lucky I am to protect these 2 little potatoes that are in my arms. And it's kind of like, and then I think about how someone could like create an environment that would make things unsafe for them kind of thing, right? So that's like, I guess, a new kind of journey and reflection in a model. So I'll let you know how I go with that. But I'm just being honest that I'm kind of,
Yeah.
it's brought up new kind of concepts and reflections.
But you must feel a bit proud because you're living a different lifestyle now to what you grew up with.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And I think like that was really great about CYC. The camps that I went to was like, they started to show me different, I guess, kind of models of families and I guess manhood, about like kind of like taking ownership for things, and like what is like humility looks like, courage, ownership, reconciling and repairing relationships that were ruptured. Like there was some really great role models I could follow on how do I repair a relationship? How do I apologize? How do I take responsibility for something? Like these weren't concepts that I like that were available to me as a street kid in Dandenong breaking into houses, right? Like you either had to like man up and beat somebody up or you were seen as a wimp, right? But then how do you kind of like reconcile or repair a relationship? How do you apologize to one of your friends without looking like a wuss kind of thing, right? So these things weren't available to me, but on these camps, I saw role models that gave really great examples on how you repair relationships and what it means that, you know, turn the other cheek and swallow your pride and that kind of stuff. So that was really awesome early on that I had some examples of like, yeah, I guess how to be in relationships, like in romantic relationships, but also just in friend relationships. That was really, really great. Being a dad, as I guess as a business owner, has been really helpful in the sense that when we look at Paylos and how we do things and how we, I guess, provide our service, it's so powerful to be able to think, well, if I was dropping my kid off or if my kid was getting picked up, like what would I want to know? Or how would I want to feel? What would I want to see from somebody that was taking care of my child? And so that's been really, really helpful when we do our respite services. That's been really, really helpful for our group programs. That's been really, really helpful for our one-to-one programs. That's been really helpful for our bookings lady. When we think about like, all right, so you're the bookings lady. You like accept all the shifts, you cancel the shifts, you get the sick calls, you get the cancellations, right? How would you want somebody to speak to you if it was your daughter being picked up from school and the support worker's not there on time? Like, how would you want that conversation to be had? And so I think that's been super, super helpful. And I think it's like, I think anyone can do that exercise, but I've just found it much more profound as a father to be able to be like, wow, man, if I was worried about their care, if I was worried about them being neurodiverse out in the community, if I was worried about all these kind of things, what would I want to see from my provider that could really put me at ease kind of thing. So that's really helped to kind of shape, I guess, how we do things. And yeah.
I remember when you kind of first got into the scene. You probably don't remember, but I do. And it almost feels like you've grown up within your business. Like it's kind of looked like a bunch of lads hanging out to something that really, no, serious, like it did grow and develop with you guys as you matured, as you got older and, you know, and things changed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'm really interested to hear when people are like, oh, I remember like when I first met you. I'm just kind of like, dude, I hope that was a great experience when we first met now. So I got a
You
bit
know how we
nervous
talk
there.
about neurodivergent things? I remember really useless things when I meet people. So I thought, when I can, I just bring it up in conversation.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, yeah, I'm glad that that was a positive experience that we can reflect on.
Also, you've kept a lot of the stuff that you've had for a very long, like they're still there with you to now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think there's been a lot of that. The original four that I was talking about in my Elon Musk kind of dream of like, if I had Elon Musk money and and I was like, I kind of had those people identified. So, for example, my friend Christian, like way before Paylos was official, like we would go to Dandenong Station and we would get like cheap sausages from like Coles or Woolies, something like that, put on a sausage sizzle, and we would play soccer with some of the kids that were hanging out at the station and would offer them food and then would offer like to do their learners with them and help them with their resume and that kind of stuff. And so he was just such an awesome dude that in his spare time, all he wanted to do was connect with youth. So I had a few people like that were just really beautiful people. So when Paylos started to get traction, I was like, hey, dude, I reckon we could get paid. Dude. Imagine we could quit our jobs and we just did this all day. And the funny thing with Christian, like he's still with us now. The funny thing with Christian was like when we first got paid, I can't remember exactly the amount, but let's say I got paid $50 for the hour, right? And I was like, I just gave the $50 to him. And then he felt weird because he's like, no, dude, I don't want your money. Like, I just like, cause we never got paid. Like, we just always did it for free. I was like, I don't want your money. I'm like, yeah, I know, but dude, but someone gave me this money and I feel weird holding on to it because I think it's yours. He's like, I'm like, dude, I have to give it to you. So then, like, it was hard for me to pay him. And then I didn't know about things like superannuation, work cover, all that kind of stuff. So then I was
So
like,
you grew with it.
I grew with it. But when I talk about like grassroots, I'm talking like, I have to be like to Christian, like, hey, dude, sorry, I need to keep some of that money back because I'm meant to pay you a suit. And he's like, yeah, okay, take it back. No, not the whole thing. Like, just give me like $20 or something. And so like, that's how kind of like non-businessy we were, right? Because what you got to understand about like the origin of Paylos was like, it was like being a few friends that in our spare time, when we weren't at work, we would hang out with at-risk youth, either at stations or whatever it was, and we'd either play soccer with them or have a barbecue. And like our journey into it was, well, if I don't have to work another job, I can do this and give my full attention to it. And so our then energy that we put into try to find funding was like, well, I just want to be able to quit my job and give this my whole heart and put my whole energy into it. And so like we never had this idea of like, oh, do you guys want to start a business? What are some good industries? We were just kind of like, hey, how cool would it be if we could hang out with youth all day and we didn't have to go to work because our bills got paid? Like, wouldn't that be crazy? And so we did that. And it was like a long journey of like trial and error on like, hey, all right, so I probably shouldn't give you all the money because I've got to pay your superannuation and that kind of stuff. But I probably should save some money aside because if we don't have work for 1 week, we need something to hold us over, right? Cool. And so like we just kind of learnt how to do business the really long, hard way, but it came from the place of like, how crazy is this that someone's paying us to do this? Like we were doing this for free. So it's like this really long, slow journey of like, okay, we shouldn't do that. Okay, let's do this. And we just can't believe that we survived. But now we're like, we've got like four properties. We've got 33 cars, 65 staff members. And I think there's been something like 600 or 700 kids that we've supported Victoria wide. So from like sausage sizzles at Dandenong Station, trying to figure out what work cover and superannuation is, to now like a pretty well-established organization. Like we got public liability insurance, which I learned was the thing. So, it's like we're covered for 20 million. I think the NDIS you need, I think maybe 5 million, 10 million, whatever, but child protection, you need 20 million to cover for that kind of stuff. So it was like things that we had to learn that way, right? So it's like, we just had this really long journey, but it came from this place of like, dude, I just want to hang out with kids and I don't want to have to go back to work. Like if we can do this full time, this would be the coolest thing ever. And so then it's just about like, all right, cool. So how do we access funding? How do we put the money away? How do we save it? How do we do this? All right, put money away for super, put money away for work cover, put money for superannuation, put money away for a rainy day, price guides, fair work, Shards Award, blah, blah, right? So it was just a long journey of that. But I think the reason that everyone kind of pitched in to do that so well is that everyone had this obsession with, if I can do this full time and not have to go back to my work, I can give my whole heart to these kids, right? So it's like, I just want to give my whole heart to this kid in this moment on this camp. And I can only do that if I can keep the lights on. So our obsession was, how do we keep the lights on? How do we make sure we've ticked our compliance checklist? Like, how do we make sure we've done that? Because if we do that well, then I can be fully present in this moment. And then and that's how, because we had that as our motivating factor of like, I just want to do this full time. And the core team was just like, dude, I just want to do this full time, because that was our motivating factor. It kind of created this environment where staff members were like just pitching in a little bit more, doing a little bit of stuff in their spare time, finding, I guess, price guides and all that kind of stuff and kind of finding ways to make this work, because everyone was quite obsessed with, dude, this is working. And we get to go, we get to hang out with kids all day and we don't have to go back to work. And that kind of drove a lot of the growth.
You guys look cool. Like, and then, yeah, like, to be honest, like, cool to be around. I know of people that have attended your services and it's fun. So were you always planning to be this popular? Because you are pretty popular in Victoria. Let's be fair.
Cool. No. So I definitely like,
It's all right. I'm not a cool mum, so it's okay. I understand.
So just for some perspective, right? Like just for some perspective, when we started doing this, it was like me, Christian, Frankie, and Kirsty. There's a few, like the first maybe 3 or 4 of us, right? Like I remember thinking by like year 5, maybe we might be able to like offer a full-time contract to somebody. Maybe I might be able to quit my job. Hopefully by year 10, there's like 5 of us on full-time hours and maybe 4 cars. And then by year 15, I was like, oh, I'd really love like a farm where kids could come and stay, where we can offer respite, because that would just be so beautiful. And I remember like we had all the like milestones, and at the 18th month mark, we had hit our 15-year goal. We already had like a team of 10 staff members. We had 4 cars, and we moved into our farm. And so like I can't express to you how low my expectations were. Like, not in a bad way, just in realistic of just kind of like, I just couldn't believe that that this many people would get behind us and believe in it and want to be a part of it. Like even with the staff members, it was like so many of the staff members were like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I just couldn't believe that so many people jumped on board to say like, they really believed in the mission. Like, because I knew what I was doing I knew that what we were doing was really powerful, but I just didn't think that many people would see the power in what we were doing or see the magic in what we were doing. And so we had so many people that signed up just thinking this is the coolest place to be. And then I think also at the time, like there was there was quite a saturated provider market that didn't really have experience in the community services sector or supporting people at all, kind of thing, right? And it was easy to identify other providers that I guess knew the sector well, and we connected with them instantly, and we wanted to kind of share resources and that kind of stuff. But there was quite a saturated market, so there was an element of kind of like it
Mm.
didn't take that much to some people, because like there's sometimes like we would do our case notes, which was like the bare minimum, and for some parents they're like, oh my gosh, we've never had a provider do case notes before, and I was like, what? How is that? Right. So there's elements of this, but I guess our expectation when we first came in was I had no idea. Like I really thought we were going to be a team of 3 or 4
Mm.
for the next 10 to 15 years. But I was so happy with that. Like I was just like, cool, 4 of us hang out with kids, like, you know what I mean? And I just couldn't believe that so many parents were like, oh man, like I would love it if you could take Timmy out, and I would love it if, you know, and so many parents were just so keen on, because I thought it was quite a niche thing, right?
Yeah.
Because my worldview as a case manager, in the top of my head, I was like, oh, I'm probably aware of maybe like 10 to 20 kids. You spread them out through a calendar year, right? There's one camp every 3 months, whatever. We could, you know what I mean? I had
Wow.
no
Yeah.
idea the amount of parents that were just so excited to hear about our services. I had no idea that so many staff members would want to join our team and just believe in the mission, because I knew that what we did worked, but I just thought it was for a much more of a niche market. I then realized it was such a larger cohort of people really wanted to connect with Paylos support workers. And I just had I can't tell you how much I underestimated the journey. Yeah.
Well, you must have some sort of like magnet towards you, because every time I have seen you networking, you pull a crowd. You might be funny, mate. I don't know.
Look, I think to be really honest, like, I think like, 16 years ago, 16 years ago when I first started doing youth work, like, I just knew really, really clearly. I just wanted to sit with people who are struggling. And so like, this has been 16 years or you can even go back to my childhood and say it's, 34 years in the making or whatever it is. Right. But it's kind of like, it's not like a new thing. It's kind of like, when I had to bury a friend and when I had to visit somebody in prison, whatever, my heart was breaking where I was like, man, I just wish you had a teacher that was funny. I wish you had like a role model that took you out to do your learn. I wish you had somebody. And so I just saw the power of somebody that would sit in your corner, barrack for you, you know, be there for you for your first job interview, take you there for your first fish. Everyone needs that uncle or that auntie, that brother or that sister, that mum or that. Everyone needs that role model. And so I knew that from very early on age. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that like it was just very clear that 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 was the only thing we were trying to do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've never at all pretended to be a support coordinator or a plan manager. I have no idea. That hasn't been my passion. I know great people that do that. That's just not my cup of tea, right? But it's kind of like we haven't come to do NDIS stuff. Like we've just come to do one specific thing, and it's my favorite thing. It's my favorite thing to talk about, and so I guess at like all these networking meetings kind of stuff, like if you give me a chance, I will talk your ear off. Not at all to make a sales pitch. Like I may never see you again, but I really want to tell you about the power of having somebody in your corner barracking for you. My mentor, his name's Craig, and he runs an organization called Alongsiders, and a similar kind of model to Palos. It's like a big brother, big sister, and they work with a lot of like really poor countries. So they started in Cambodia, but now they're in like 15 countries, like around like India, Africa, like stuff. But he just refers to everyone needs an alongside. Everybody needs someone that's going to come alongside them and walk with them and journey with them. And so that's my favorite thing to talk about. I'll talk about it any chance I can get. We're not, I didn't have to kind of learn a script or study a market or find a gap in the market. I've lived the gap in the market. I've buried friends because there was a gap in that market. I've worked as a case manager and seen young people who never had anyone to take them fishing or camping or four-wheel driving, that didn't pick them up for a footy game, that wasn't there for them on their first job interview. I've seen firsthand the pain of dropping off a young person to a homeless shelter with a garbage bag full of clothes because
That's the
they've got no
worst,
housing
isn't it?
options.
It is.
And so
Yeah.
like just seeing that firsthand is kind of like, we all need an alongside. We need somebody that's going to come alongside them and stand in their corner, barrack for them, advocate for them. It's my favorite thing to talk about. I'll talk about it till the cows come home. If the NDIS funds us, if they don't, we're still going to do it. It will be back to me and Christian and Frankie and that kind of stuff at Dandenong Station doing sausage sizzles. Like it's our favorite thing to do. We'll do it no matter what, whether someone pays us or not. And I think, when you see me at networking meetings, it's because someone's had this, someone's asked me about something and then I just can't help it. I'm like, oh, dude, can I tell you about how important it is to have somebody advocating in your corner? And it's just gonna come out. It's just my favorite thing to talk about. Yeah.
So you built the business, but now you do some mentoring as well because you do speak at events and you're on panels. Can you explain maybe to people why you enjoy sharing your story so much?
Yeah, so I think I guess there's a quite a unique journey there in saying that like there's the lived experience, there's the work experience, and there's the study experience. And when I look at things like our residential care system, when I look at things like the NDIS and how we fund things, when I look at things like public's perception of it, when I look at things like youth justice and corrections. So I look at like all of these large institutions, I look at all of these, I guess, these frameworks. I'm really passionate about bringing a voice to the table that might be an alternative voice. One of my favorite things to talk about is co-design. And one of the talks that I love to give is that co-design is not just for the policymakers. And I know that when we talk about co-design, it's normally this framework of like governments will co-design with peak bodies, right? But I think co-design can be done at all levels. And so I will challenge, when I speak at like a child protection forum, I will challenge the case manager all the way up to the Minister of Child Protection on how co-design can be used at every touch point. And so I've seen firsthand the power of bringing a young person's voice into a room, right? So in my role as a case manager, my favorite thing to do was to explain to the magistrate or to explain to the care team or to explain to a panel what my young person was experiencing and what they were dealing with and what they were wrestling with. And I also loved explaining that complex system back to my young person to help them to navigate it. And so in Paylos, I get to do a lot of explaining the system to our participants. But the other part of the job is I really love bringing voices into rooms, like into courtrooms, into forums, into conferences. And so one of the ways that I get to do that is through the public speaking. And so when I speak at like, I got to speak at the National Justice Conference, I got to speak at the Child Protection Forum
Yeah, you've
and
been
panels like there's
everywhere.
a few I've had a few amazing opportunities. And I just, what I see as my mission there is like, how can I bring the voice of some of our young people into that room to, I guess, maybe challenge some of the perspectives on how we view some of these problems, some of these systemic issues and what that can look like. And so it's one of my favorite ones, like I said, co-design. The other one would be around, and it is a little bit of a cheeky plug to Paylos, but I try not to talk too much about Paylos. I want to talk more about the program. But the idea behind Paylos is that you can do a lot of clinical therapeutic work. You can do a lot of frameworks without the typical case management jargon. And so what I love to talk about is how you can provide the frameworks of respite. You can provide the frameworks of strengths-based practices and trauma informed. You can do all that kind of stuff, but it can look like a full driving club. And no one really realizes there's child protection in the air. So you've got the safeguards there. So I love talking about how we can challenge some of the ways that we're used to home-based care, out-of-home care, some of our therapeutic supports. I want to challenge people's thinking to say, hey, this is how we've done respite, or this is how we've done mentoring. And we've done it in a way that still has the safeguards, still has the frameworks, but it doesn't have any of the labels. This is how we've done it. My challenge to you is when you go back to your role as an AOD worker, a youth justice worker, as a therapeutic clinician, my question to you is, what are the frameworks that are non-negotiable? What are the safeguards that are non-negotiable? But what's some of the jargon that we can remove? And what would it look like for you to pay loss your version of AOD counseling and that kind of stuff? And so I'm really excited to get people thinking on how things can look a little bit differently. Yeah, how things can look a little bit differently while you're still, I guess, providing services, but removing some of the labels. Because my argument is that those labels and that stigma are significant barriers for people to engage with services. And so I'm really excited to have those conversations because I feel like that's a way that I can bring a young person's voice into the room of the people who are writing policies, who are deciding on funding budgets and that kind of stuff. I really want them to consider some other ways to connecting with people.
While we're there, I'm going to give you a juicy one. Ready for this?
Yeah,
What?
awesome.
Yeah, well, you're talking about all the things that I love hearing, but what would, oh, I see you even doing that. What changes would you like to see across the disability and youth service sector for people to be successful and be more involved in community?
Okay, it is the simplest answer. I promise you, it is the
Okay.
simplest thing. Right?
Now I'm disappointed.
It's
I thought you like an argument.
No. It is so simple. It's early
Go for it.
intervention, right? I can't tell you the
Yes.
amount of
Okay.
times that I've been working with child protection and I would like ask for funding for something, right? And let's give it a ballpark figure. Let's say I ask for $100 or whatever it is, or $1,000, whatever it is. Can't get it across the line, right? When a young person's like 12 or 13. That same young person stealing cars, needle hanging out their arm, 113 charges. We suddenly have a budget of $1 million to intervene and do whatever we need to get this young person, blah, blah. It's kind of like, yeah, but I was only asking for $100 last, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, right? Now, those are extreme examples and, a de-identified story kind of thing. But the point I'm trying to make is it's really easy to access money on the crisis end, right? It's really hard for people to see the need for money at the intervention end. And like you think about the cost of like emergency services, you think about the costs of like our hospitals, our prisons, like how much money it costs to have somebody incarcerated each day. There's a significant overrepresentation of people with disabilities who are living in custody. So like when we talk about budget cuts and we talk about, the hot topic, right, is the budget cuts to the NDIS, right? But the reality is that we're just kicking the can down the road. But I can tell you from firsthand experience, right? I've worked with young people. I worked with a girl who was living in residential care, and her mother was in that exact same unit, in that exact same home. And then she had a child, right? So there's 3 generations of children in that same house. So I've seen the full life cycle from before the baby was born to when the baby was born to having intervention from child protection, family violence, like just a whole cohort of like illicit substance use, child exploitation, sexual exploitation, criminal exploitation. And what I can confidently tell you, you can't convince me otherwise, but when I look at the big picture, is how much more money it costs the government. Essentially, it's what it costs the taxpayer to kick the can down the road. And when we talk about things like the NDIS, and people talk about the blowouts and that kind of stuff, right? What I need to advocate strongly for is not only are you kicking the can down the road, it comes back so much more expensive. It comes back in the cost of our health system. It comes back in the cost of our police. It comes back in the cost of our paramedics, our emergency services. It comes back in the cost of our incarceration rates. It comes back in the cost of our insurance premiums. If houses are being broken into, cars are being stolen, insurance premiums are going to go up. We ultimately pay for it. We also pay for it in the fact that businesses don't want to invest in areas if crime rates go up, which then impacts the economy. Like I could go on forever to talk about the cost of not caring, right? So if you did not care about human life, and you only cared about the economy, if that was the only thing that you cared about, cool. Let me sell you how to save so much money to the taxpayer. You need to fund early intervention. You need to fund things like respite. One of the things that happened recently, right? So Mark Butler was looking for the powers to, I guess, increase and decrease someone's plan at any time, whatever, right? So the Greens went in to negotiate with them and they put a stop on everything except for community access. And so that kind of tells me that the community access is like the low-hanging fruit. You combine that with the cuts to respite, you'd see that community access and respite are the low-hanging fruits that people see as the easy things to cut. Because why would we fund people to get coffees and why would we fund people to go to Gold Coast, right? Cool. The story that I want to tell you about is, in out-of-home care, it can cost upwards of $1 million per child per year in out-of-home care, right? But we can barely scrape together $200 a week to our foster carers. I remember when I was working in residential care, there was a young person that was maybe 6 or 7 years old. And I said to my agency at the time, I was like, man, I would happily take that kid home, but I need to earn around about $70K a year to cover my rent, bills, and all that kind of stuff. And I know that this kid is full on. So I wouldn't be able to work another job. I would have to be picking up from school because we'd be having fights and that kind of stuff. And there was no way they could fund my wage or fund my living for $70,000. However, they were paying me $70,000 a year to work a 40-hour work week with breaks, annual leave, sick leave, superannuation, work cover. I couldn't work more than 10 hours a day, and I couldn't do more than 42 hours in a week before I got paid overtime. So I had all these benefits, right? And I got paid my $70K a year, whatever it was. But if I was to take that same kid home, so I was to work 24/7 with no breaks, no weekends, no annual leave, no sick leave, no superannuation, no nothing, I'll get paid $200 a week. But alternatively, you leave that kid in residential care and you have me and 20 other staff members all get paid super, work cover, all that kind of stuff. You think about the cost of the house, the property damage, the psychologist, all that kind of stuff. This kid was nearly $2 million a year to the government when he was living. But they didn't want to pay me $70,000 thing. Now, the point that I'm trying to say from that is not only would this kid have a stable home, not only would this kid have what would feel like more of a family home, you would be saving the taxpayer like nearly $1 million a year, if not more, right? And so the story that I want to bring to the table when we talk about things like community access, when we talk about things like respite, like they go, oh, respite's expensive, $10,000 and blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like, yeah, but if that carer burns out and that placement breaks down and they enter out of home care, you've then got to put a
Mm.
rostering team of maybe 20 to 30 people on full-time wages to staff that and to fund that. You then look at things like community access, right? And we've got a young person and you've met them who used to cost the government a lot of money in 000 calls. At least once a month, there was sectioned under Mental Health Act and spent time, was involuntary admitted and that kind of stuff. And the cost of the psychiatrist and the state of mental health facility, I think it was like $100,000 every time we had to call 000. But for $200 a week, I can send a support worker to hang out with his kid and take him to go get a kebab and go check out some cars and do all those kind of fun things, right? Now that young person hardly uses the NDIS plan, is working, living independently, paying rent, paying bills, paying tax, he's got a tax file number, and contributing to society, right? That's one specific story of somebody who, for $200 a week, saved the government like $100,000 for whatever month he had to spend time in a mental health facility, along with the paramedics and all that kind of stuff that came out, right? So my main message is how foolish it is of us to write off things like respite and community access as low-hanging fruits, because it is so short-sighted, for a politician to only think about the next 2 to 4 years. Imagine I was running a business and all of my business decisions were based on, oh, I've just got to get through 2 years. So I just sold all the cars, sold all the houses, sold everything, because for the next 2 years, my budget looks great. But after that 2 years, I've got nothing to run it on, right? I'd look silly. No business owner runs like that. A business owner will run on like a 10, 20-year plan of making sure there's money aside for a rainy day and that kind of stuff. I feel like sometimes when it comes to talking about care, we have almost like this impulse buy of like, oh, we're going to spend money on this. And we're very reactive in our spending. And so I totally can appreciate budget constraints. I totally can appreciate they have to draw a line in the sand. I can totally appreciate those concepts. I'm not asking in any way, shape, or form to be reckless with our funding. I'm in no way, shape, or form asking that we discredit the responsibility we have as providers to the taxpayer to be able to justify that what we're doing is reasonable and necessary. I in no way, shape, or form discredit that. My argument is, please do not underestimate something like community access and do not reduce it to something as simple as, oh, so someone can get a coffee so they don't feel lonely. No, my bro. Let me tell you, it's not that. Because I've already told you an example of someone going out to get a kebab, which the NDIS didn't pay for. The young person paid for it out of their own pocket. I just want to make that very clear, right? The young person going to get a kebab, the $200 that I spent on the staff member to go spend that time with that young person meant that we had no more 000 calls for that young person. None. No more mental health admissions. No more being sectioned under mental health acts, right?
It's like
No,
watching.
no longer entering custody, incarcerated. Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just going to say it's like watching a slow car crash because we can
Yeah.
all see it happen, and we all know it too. It's like
Mm,
watching this person, like bit by bit, and you can see the funding go, and then smash. We're back to square one. It's going to cost more than before. I'll give you an example. I had a participant that had lots of different mental health concerns, but wouldn't leave the house and hadn't left the house in years. Paired this person with a support worker, took 3 months to go feed the ducks. And it was like the
mm,
biggest thing
mm.
ever because they actually
Yeah,
left their front door. It's these type of stories that they miss, and the people that make these money decisions aren't the ones a part of the car crash afterwards when it goes kaput, and then
yeah,
you've got to put the
yeah,
work back into it again. It
yeah, yeah. But like, there are so many people that's costing the taxpayer dollar right now that are sitting in prisons that wouldn't be costing the taxpayer if we had a youth worker in their school or a teacher aide or an after school program they could attend or a respite service they could go to. Like, I just can't stress how different our society would look if we funded things like alongsiders, right? If we funded those mentors that would come in and connect with people. I can't emphasize how much that would change the trajectory of our society, how much of a decrease we would see in youth crime offending, in adult offending, in family violence, in illicit substance use, the impact that it will have on our community. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not saying we would I'm not saying that we would eliminate the problem. I would say we would
Reduce it.
significantly reduce it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you would
Yep.
significantly reduce family violence rates. You would significantly reduce incarceration rates. You would significantly reduce crime within our community. And then everything would become cheaper. Business would, like people will be investing more. There'll be so much more job opportunities. Like it would just be significantly better. Like I'm purely taking the angle. I haven't spoken about anyone's well-being yet because I'm trying to really speak to, if the only thing we're going to talk about is funding, let me tell you how much money you would save.
Okay.
And coincidentally, it's a really nice thing to do to care for people. But if we don't want to talk about, you want to talk about money, the argument's there.
I don't. I've been humbled for the last couple of weeks because I have a family member in hospital, and in hospital, do you know you have to pay for free to air TV? Yeah, you have to pay to watch free to air TV in hospital. So when I was visiting this family member, we paid for the week for this family member to watch TV. Next door was a young lady with disabilities and didn't have money to have free to air TV, and hence would have all these issues in hospital because we were bored and we had nothing to do, unwell. And I found that so wild because it was something that could be prevented. Or, if you had the same opportunity, everyone had the same opportunity, yet a public hospital you have to pay. Like it
Yeah.
blew my mind. Like it, yeah. Sorry, I'm off track, but like it's all
No,
these
that's, I
little
mean, that's on
things.
track. No, but it's something
Yeah,
like
but
what would
it's
that,
all these
what would that
it's something so
realistically cost?
simple. How
Yeah.
simple is that? Why isn't it for everybody? Why, like, yeah, it's free to air. Like, there's ads.
And I think like, yeah, I mean, the ads are paying for it, right? The companies are paying for the ads. They're paying for the TV. I think for me, when you talk about things like care and that kind of stuff, right? It normally becomes like a political thing of around like, well, if you're extremely left wing, you're going to be over supporting care. If you're extremely right wing, you're going to be like, well, we'll fund the bare minimum and that's it, right? But I guess my argument is, I believe that from the extreme left to the extreme right, we would all agree that we don't want to see, we don't want to see Australia turn into a third world country where you see kids begging on the street kind of thing, right? We would all agree that no matter where you stand politically, right? What I really would love to do through conversation with people is to explain the correlation between not funding here and then what you see in some of those developing countries that you visit, like you ever visit like Thailand or Cambodia or India and that kind of stuff, and you see people begging in the street. Everyone in Australia would agree that we don't want to see that in Australia, but they'll say, yeah, I don't see that, but I just don't want to fund people to go for coffees. What I would love to have the conversation, like, let me explain to you how funding people you're not funding people, but funding that actually disrupts that. And I guess the conversation I would really love to have with as many people as I could is the cost of not caring and what that really, really means to us. Because I don't think people realize how much we have in common politically when it comes to how we want to care for things. I remember, I'm trying really hard to not make this a political thing, but I remember I was talking with one of my friends about the political situation happening in the United States. And he just married somebody from the United States. And we were kind of talking about how divided the country was. And I had some very strong views about a particular politician. And I was kind of unpacking this with him. And I remember he said to me, he goes, what I've learned from my time over in the States talking with people is the extreme left and the extreme right have far more in common than you would realize. And what he said was both people really want to see America great. They would agree that they want to see America great. They would agree they would want to see America safe. They would agree that they want to see, and he went down the list, right? And he goes, it's that this person sees the way to make it safe. For example, I'm not getting political here, but this person agrees they want to see it safe by more guns, and this person agrees they want to see it safe by less guns, right? But the common denominator there is they're both fighting for safety for their community, right? And I just found that quite profound because it really helped me to kind of think about when I meet people who have different views to me, I know that me and that person have a lot more in common than we have in difference, right? But we think, because of our
Yeah,
social media algorithms, we think we have a lot less in common than we do. But I would encourage you that whether you're extremely on the left or whether you're extremely on the right, when you meet somebody like that, there's a polar opposite to you, you would be able to find more things in common. Like you would say, you'd both be able to agree, I want Australia to be safe. I want Australia to be healthy. I want Australia to have a really good economy. I want to have Australia to have really great job opportunities. I want Australia to have, so you'd agree on that kind of stuff. And you'd be like, and where you'd find the disagreement is the roadmap there. So I think it's to get there through this, and this. Or I think it's to get through this. But you'd find that your endpoint, there's a
Mm.
lot more in common. So with that in mind, if I had a magic wand and I could have a conversation with all the people that sit opposite to me politically, I would love an opportunity to explain how we both want Australia to be a safe, happy, prosperous place.
Yeah.
And I would love to be able to explain to you through evidence of like data that reflects this, that if we can intervene early with our community services and our respite, that we will see a significant decrease in social spending and it's going to significantly impact our economy, which is essentially what people are screaming for. And I would just love the opportunity to explain how we agree that this is our end destination, that we both want the same end destination. I would love the opportunity to explain the roadmap to that, that through this evidence and through this data, the roadmap to how we get to a safe, healthy and prosperous Australia would be that if we can intervene here, what we're going to see is we're going to see more people enter the more people enter the workforce, more people paying taxes, more people stimulating the economy. We're going to see safer communities, more jobs starting. We're going to see that Australia, and this is the roadmap to do that. And I believe that we would agree on our end destination. And I'd love the opportunity to talk about the roadmap to get there based on the evidence of me working in the sector for the last 16 years.
Do you have to be so wise? All right, you ready for this one? So you've been in the
Yeah.
sector for 16 years. You've had a company for 5 years. Yep. If you had a crystal ball, where do you see Paylos in the next 3 to 5 years? What are you doing? Anything? You gave me a lot of Easter eggs, so I'm expecting something big.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Look, I think I'm probably going to disappoint the hypes. I know I've been hyping everything. I think like what I said from the beginning, we just want to be alongsiders to people, right? And so when I look at the future of Payless, and I said this before, like if let's say they deleted the NDIS forever, they deleted child protection forever, what's that going to look for Payless? It's going to be me, Christian, Frankie, Kirsty at Dandenong Station doing sausage sizzles, right? And so everything that Payless will do will come under the banner of being an alongsider. It will come under the banner of, hey, I want to find somebody that's struggling, take them under our wing and help them with a resume and help with that kind of stuff, right? So I think consistently for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that's what we're going to be doing. More specifically, to answer your question and what we're super excited about, if you don't mind, I could do a little cheeky plug.
Go. I'm all ears.
So we've got this thing called Beyond Payless, and essentially Beyond Payless it came from one of our participants who we believed was an absolute superstar, right? She was just so cool, had so much potential, was an awesome person. And we were helping her with jobs and she just got really anxious and nervous every time she went for a job interview and just like wouldn't be able to attend or fumble the ball in a job interview, that kind of stuff. And we just had this thought of like, I know that she would be a superstar. I know that she would be great. So like she would be such an asset for any company. But I wish they could see what we could see. But they couldn't see that because she couldn't get past the interview because of her nerves. And I was like, it's such a Payless thing for us to be able to be like, oh man, like I know that you're amazing. I just want someone else to see that you're amazing. So let me provide an alternative pathway because this traditional pathway is not working. How to provide an alternate pathway? So then we started doing car washing. And so now essentially we've got, I think, car washing, office cleaning. We've got our media services. We've got gardening, so lawn services, cleaning. I say cleaning. Oh, and we're about to. So we've got a mechanic that does all of our cars, but now we're about to get that mechanic to start servicing our general public and that kind of stuff. And so it still comes under the Payless mission of the alongsider kind of thing, but we've really tried to take the next step of some of our kids we know are awesome, but get a little bit nervous when it comes to job interviews. So we're just going to put our money where our mouth is and we're going to hire them ourselves. And we're just going to cut people's grass, wash their cars, clean their offices, shoot their LinkedIn photos or their engagement parties. We're going to service your cars and all of our guys are going to find jobs. They're going to get apprenticeships, all that kind of stuff. So what we're excited for the next 3 to 5 years is just, I guess really praying for finding the right people that can kind of champion that. Cause I don't know how to do photography, right? I don't know I'm not a mechanic. I can't fix cars. And so we're just really hoping that we can identify the right people that really get our kids that can also assist with, I guess, some of those career pathways. We've got a couple of people that can help with some of those services, but we need to find some of those other services. But for the next 3 to 5 years, we're just going to focus our energy on developing those services so we can just service our local community, but we can also have job opportunities for our kids. And so the idea would be you might meet Paylos in a capacity of one-to-one supports. You might then attend a mechanic program. And then after that, you've built up the confidence. You can then shadow the mechanic and then get a job working as a mechanic kind of thing. So that's our little pathway that we're working on. And that's what we're hoping to do for the next 3 to 5 years is to, I guess, really solidify those kind of systems. And we're really, really big on no sympathy. So we don't want anyone to hire us because we're the disabled kids or we're the child protection kids. It's really going to be, hey, we're the best at cutting grass, we're the best at washing cars, we're the best at doing media, and you're hiring us because we're good. And then later on, you find out that maybe we've had a rough background, but it's not really the reason you're hiring us kind of thing. So for the next 3 to 5 years, we're just trying to find a way to get that to work. But I don't know anything about businesses, but our journey has just been kind of like, all right, cool. We're going to learn and just believe that people are going to, we're going to learn and we're just going to believe that people are going to pitch in and we're going to make it work.
Well, if it's anything after this podcast is done, Luke, I'm going to send it to your media team for them to make me look like a team new editor. They're really good. They're very good at what they do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
So
for the podcast.
that's our hope. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Is there anything that I missed or you'd like to bring up?
No, that was perfect. I'm happy with, I'm really happy with how the conversation naturally flowed. I felt like I really got to talk about the things that I get excited talking about.